How's your week been?
Goodness, has it been a week? Actually, I should say, has it been a week? I've been writing about my pet hates, finding the activity and the subject both revealing and therapeutic. I've got quite a few.
I'm sure you have. It must be good to let them off your chest and onto the page. Let me read them sometime.
I can let you have a few now, just to get us underway, because I'm sure you have plans for today.
Just a few would be very fine.
Well, you reminded me of one with your question about my week. Have you ever experienced how checkout people and other servers ask you how your day has been so far at 10:30 in the morning? I feel like saying, I'll come back at 4:30 and let you know all about it. I never do, of course. I mean, say that kind of thing. I'm generally polite and chatty with essential servers. They do a shitty job for little or nothing. Then there are people who earn heaps of money because their job is deemed worthy, or they've studied, or been born into it, or got lucky, or whatever.
What would you do about that kind of inequality, should I say?
Yes, you should indeed, I feel, but I'm not sure I could distinguish these words easily.
Well, as a medical person talking about health, say, I would say that inequality in health describes something as being just different in general, where inequity is more specific. You're saying that something should be fixed. You can say that there's an inequality in pay between men and women, a general description of a situation. But inequity says this is wrong and pinpoints the bad thing.
You should have been a teacher, Doc. I think I can almost understand that. Now, where were we?
You were going on about not liking inequality in jobs and earnings. What would you do about it?
Oh, easy. I'd reduce high salaries and give everyone a universal basic wage. Did you know that governments can actually save heaps that way, in terms of savings in education and health, etc.? People tend to be better off all round if they don't have to worry about where their next meal is coming from.
All right, very good. Perhaps your pet hates could be examined more closely another day for the good of your soul.
Oh, I was just getting warmed up. I'm sure you've noticed how much music is thrust upon us in public. All that Muzak rubbish in supermarkets. And I wouldn't support it if it was rock and roll or classical music. No, I'm even-minded there. It's the assumption that we need music that I find a bit arrogant. And you know, it's often played way too loud. So I've lost count of the number of places like bars, shops, cafes, even restaurants where I've asked for the volume to be turned down. Oh, don't get me started.
Very good, I'll try not to. It sounds as if you've given some thought to your feelings there. I recall that you really opened up on our last session, giving me an insight into your inner turmoils with a long list of your hypochondriacal tendencies.
You told me that hypochondria is now referred to as medical anxiety disorder.
Yes, I rather prefer the resonance of the words hypochondria and hypochondriacal, and also the gravitas of the Greek origins.
Totally with you on that one. I'd prefer to have hypochondria than some disorder that I'm anxious about.
So, let's continue our illuminating conversation about your earlier times, trying to shed light on the deeper recesses of your soul. I know that you like to remember the past, the deep past in your case now.
So steady on, Doc. I'm not much older than you.
Now that's as maybe, so we can both go back a long way. Now, you've told me about your happy childhood, living in the countryside, a healthy upbringing and reading a lot of good books. Who was your favourite author?
Well, my mother had a collection of John Buchan novels. I really enjoyed them. You'll know the 39 Steps, I'm sure, at least seen the film. Then there were the Sherlock Holmes stories. I read heaps of them. Funny that they were both Scottish writers, pure coincidence. So here's another one, RLS.
Sorry, I know I should know who that is, but I'm just a medical doctor.
Oh, so was Conan Doyle. But I'm talking about Robert Louis Stevenson.
Ah, RLS, the initials. I believe Stevenson is often quoted. His quotes are famous. In fact, I know one. It is better to travel than to arrive.
Actually, to be more accurate, keeping to the way Stevenson wrote it, it's to travel hopefully is a better thing than to arrive, and the true success is to labour.
Well, I stand corrected, thank you. I wouldn't have expected anything less from someone who took a course in Scottish literature, even if it was a way back a bit.
I don't think RLS did anything like that.
You know perfectly well that I know fine that RLS wouldn't need to do something like that.
Just keeping you on your toes. I don't think the when or wherefore matters if one studies something as ancient and excellent as Scottish literature, apart from the fact that the 60s were a pretty good time to be a student of anything.
You know, I think Chinese writings express the same thing in the likes of The Journey as the Reward. That was a long time before Stevenson, but I must say I like his elegant expression of it. Do carry on.
There are many other quotations from Stevenson's writings, such as, "The man who forgets to be thankful has fallen asleep in life." And here's a good one for you, Doctor. "Every heart that has beat strongly and cheerfully has left a hopeful impulse behind it in the world." And how about this one? "That man is a success who has lived well, laughed often, and loved much."
I hope you have done that. Perhaps our sessions will be a success because of such. My heart beating cheerfully, travelling hopefully, etc. I get a feeling of simplicity in them, as if there are common thoughts and sentiments.
Oh yes, surely, but it's the way that they're written that's the thing.
Any more?
I like this one very much. "Keep your fears to yourself, but share your courage with others."
I sincerely hope you'll continue to feel that you can share everything with me, apart from which I'd be out of business if everyone hid their fears.
Yes, I suppose you do trade a bit in people's worries about themselves. You must have to keep your pecker up. How do you do it?
I thought I was supposed to be quizzing you with personal questions, but since you've asked, I'll take this chance to share it with you. I read a lot. I walk a lot. I love my work. I have wonderful friends, and I drink plenty of good wine.
Fill the cup, what boots it to repeat how time is slipping underneath our feet.
Is that Stevenson again?
No, that's Omer Khayyam from his Rubaiyat. "A jug of wine, a loaf of bread, and thou beside me singing in the wilderness."
Oh, thank you. Do you really mean that?
Well, he goes on to say that the wilderness would be paradise, but maybe not so much because of you or anyone else, but more because of the wine.
Thank you for the pledge of confidence. It would be fine wine, I'm sure. I imagine Stevenson enjoyed a drop. Probably whiskey where he came from, eh?
Oh, I'm not sure about that. He wasn't a strong man, suffered ill health most of his life. In fact, on doctor's orders, he had to leave Edinburgh in its miserable, cold, damp weather in the long winter. In fact, he spent the last 4 years of his short life in Samoa. However, he had managed a fair bit of travelling in his life, in spite of the poor health. One of the greatest things he did, to my mind, was walk the Cevennes in the south of France with a donkey. He wrote all about it in Travels with a Donkey.
Recommend that one?
Yes, but better to do the walk, I think. There are Stevenson tours in the Cevennes. You can trace his footsteps. And the donkey's. Her name was Clementine. I think the French peasant who sold her to Stevenson actually sold him a mule, but he couldn't tell the difference at the time. Anyway, she turned out to be hellishly stubborn. It doesn't make pleasant reading at times as Stevenson tries to get her to move. He was cruel to the poor creature, but she survived the journey and I hope went on to live out her life, perhaps forgetting Stevenson and his beatings, but maybe better because of it. She certainly provided good story material. I sometimes think lucky donkey or mule to have spent time with the great writer, even if he did mistreat her.
Interesting contradiction that you conjure up there. I hope you don't have too many tensions like that in your life.
No, Doctor, there's no insight into my soul or mental state with that. Nice try, though.
I should say that quite a romantic undertaking to walk hills with a donkey or mule. Would you like to do it sometime?
Yes and no. The idea of it is attractive, but I'm not big on tours, being guided, that kind of thing.
Bit of a loner, eh?
Yes, I should say. Nothing wrong with that. I think RLS was probably a loner. Would have to be to write the way he did. One thing's for sure, walking the Cevennes was a far cry from his Edinburgh childhood, which he recalled sharply in his poems for children, especially one I recall having read to me when I was a child, and that was The Lamplighter. I remember these lines well about the old lamplighter Leary lighting the lamp outside the boy Stevenson's window. Old gas lamps in those days. My mother often read it to me. Can hear it now. "For we are very lucky with a lamp before the door, and Leary stops to light it, and he lights so many more. And oh, before you hurry by with ladder and with light, oh Leary, see a little child, and nod to him tonight.
Oh, lovely one for children, but a new one to me. He had a light touch, so to speak. Stevenson obviously means a lot to you. His writing gave you solace. He's been like a companion to you through life. Can I go so far as to say?
Well, yes, up to a point. Living in the deep countryside, I had to make friends with books and writers, with fine writing, good stories, lovely poems. My childhood companions, as you say.
You had to make friends with them?
Yes, I spent a lot of time on my own as a child, an only child. Of course, I had my parents, but I often yearned for someone my age to play with.
You had a lonesome childhood in the countryside?
Yes. The nearest neighbour was a couple of miles away.
What other writers did you like?
Oh, John Buchan, Jack London, Edgar Allan Poe, Charles Dickens. Also, I remember King Solomon's Mines. Who was the writer? Odd name. Got it. Rider Haggard. Great name, eh?
Your favourite was Stevenson?
I would say so. Maybe equal with Jack London.
London a bit further away.
Jack London. Yes, further away than Edinburgh. He lived a short life in California when he wasn't sailing the high seas. Stevenson was a bit of an adventurer too, travelled a lot, as I said. Jack London died in 1916, but Stevenson died in 1894, a bit before my time. Mind you, I did manage to get almost physically close to him. His home in Edinburgh was up for sale in the late 1960s, and I paid a visit as if I was a potential buyer. No chance in my early 20s of making a purchase. Just wanted to imagine the great man being there, looking out the same windows, same views through the eyes of the writer. I like doing that kind of thing.
The power of the imagination. Tell me about his home.
It was a lovely place, on 3 or 4 floors, full of light, with its own gardens at the back. It was obvious the family had been well off. His father, Robert Stevenson, was an engineer, famous in Scotland at least for building the Bell Rock Lighthouse off the east coast. I think Robert Louis was supposed to follow in Dad's footsteps, but he took law for a time at university. The Stevenson Lighthouse was a real lifesaver because the rocks there were treacherous, so Father Stevenson became something of a hero. But back to the writer, the great writer. His home from age 5 for 23 years. I got the particulars of the house at 17 Heriot Row in Edinburgh's beautiful Georgian Newtown, which the family moved to in 1856.
Interesting. Very interesting. So you saw the same views out of the windows as Stevenson did long ago?
Oh yes, I can remember feeling that powerfully. He also saw those gardens and hills and the sky. There was an amazing thing in the gardens. They contained a pond with a tiny island, surely the inspiration for Treasure Island. Also I learned that the lamps on the outside of the house were the originals, so the Lamplighter poem came to mind. I'm reminded now of my cousin, who plays great old rock and roll for a living. He wrote a stage performance on Stevenson and his works, putting on the show at the Edinburgh Festival. He used an actor, playing the part of the writer, dramatising some scenes from the novels, and he managed to acquire the services of a big knob Edinburgh comedian and TV personality, Ronnie Corbett, to do some of the readings and the linking commentary, appearing for free just for the premiere, which was sold out. Overall, it was telling the story of Stevenson's life and times, a fine musical homage. I couldn't go to the show because I was living overseas in Japan at that time in 1985. Actually, not too far away from where Stevenson died.
Interesting. Where was that again?
Samoa. He lived there for his health. He died there and was buried there. I'd love to go to his grave someday. He wrote a poem for his gravestone, suitably called Requiem. Let's see. Here we go. Under the wide and starry sky, dig the grave and let me lie. Glad did I live and gladly die, and I laid me down with a will.
That should probably go at the end of our conversation.
Oh, good idea. So Stevenson was born in Edinburgh, went to the university there, and now he lives on in a fine museum, the Writers' Museum, containing works and possessions from his old Edinburgh home. He shares the museum with Sir Walter Scott and Robert Burns. Funny, but that reminds me of a course I took at university in Scottish literature, and believe it or not, one of the students in that course was an eccentric American who came to classes dressed like Robert Louis Stevenson.
Good grief, that's dedication. Or, as you say, eccentricity. What did he wear?
Well, I can't recall everything, but one garb stood out. He wore what Stevenson decked himself in to visit whorehouses. The prostitutes all knew him and had a nickname for him, the Green Velvet, because of the fine green jacket he wore. So the American had a green velvet jacket with white cuffs, white shirt and roughly knotted neckerchief, and I think also a fine black walking stick and shiny black boots.
Was he knowledgeable about the literature? I mean, could he back up his sartorial imitation?
Oh yes, he was right into it. Was able to criticise and appreciate. He even had a beard, longish lank hair and a gaunt face looking a bit like Stevenson's. Uncanny stuff, really. It put the rest of us in the shade a bit. I mean, going to such lengths to immerse yourself in what you're studying? When I think back now, not a bad idea, really.
Yes. I can't imagine any medical student going so far as to dress like Alexander Fleming, Pasteur or Simpson. It would be very odd at medical school. Is there anything else you'd like to relieve yourself of now?
Nope, nothing dodgy to tell you. I was simply enjoying the lovely memories of Robert Louis. Better to recall the good times, I say, to relish the interesting and colourful moments, the humorous things, all in the hope of lifting the present and making the world better for the memories well recalled and described.
Ignore history at your peril?
I think it goes like this. Those who ignore history are doomed to relive it.
Well, have you something else to tell?
From my past?
Yes, that's what this kind of session with me is all about, don't you know? So, I was thinking perhaps there's something you'd feel you'd like to unburden yourself of now. Could be about Robert Louis Stevenson, or anything else that springs, of course.
Sorry, I hadn't realised that I was carrying any weight from that kind of memory. Well, actually, there is something. I just said that I was living in Japan, not so far from Stevenson's last home where he died in Samoa. I have a close friend in Australia. I went to university with him in Edinburgh. He was doing medicine and I was an arty-farty arts student doing a heap of reading and writing. Maybe it's the reason I'm able to write this mellifluous dialogue now. Okay. Don't look at me like that. Anyway, my friend Tom went to Samoa in 1986. Not that the year matters much, but I do like to fix things in time, perhaps a symptom or result of aging, there being more time behind than ahead.
Yes. Your friend Tom?
Oh, thank you. Tom told me that he has a great memory of that visit. One that has stayed with him, unforgettable for him.
We say abiding, an abiding memory.
Oh, who's we, pray tell? Doctors say abiding, do you? So there's an abiding illness, abiding ailment and treatment, abiding hernia and arthritis, abiding hypochondria, abiding bandage. No, that would be a binding bandage. Sorry, couldn't resist that. Anyway, who is we?
It's the royal we.
Oh, nothing to do with your medical fraternity or jargon.
We would agree.
To continue. Tom told me that he was amazed at the esteem the locals still held the great man from Edinburgh in, the esteem they had for him. They loved the creator of Treasure Island, a book I doubt the locals had read. So why did they look up to him? You may well ask. Natives being not well disposed to foreigners in general, leastways not in Stevenson's time, over 100 years before, at the time of Tom's visit, that is. However, Tom was talking about Samoans at his present, I think.
I wonder if it was because his famous preceded him, or because they recognised a nice man.
Nice, yes. But Tom wasn't famous.
Now, don't be silly. You know well what I mean. Please try and hold the line. You do better when you keep to the topic in a sensible way.
I have no idea if Stevenson was nice. Could find out, I suppose.
I imagine that a writer of his calibre could have been somewhat split. Sometimes nice, sometimes not so nice, judging by the cruelty he inflicted on a donkey. Still, I suppose if he found himself alone on the hills of southern France with a creature that refused to move, there would have to be some resort to more than just coaxing and cajoling.
Okay, I'll need to consult more authorised and scientific records, rather than accept your putative putterings. Let me get back to Tom's story, please. Where was I? Where was he? Where were we, as you might say?
We were wondering why the locals revered the great writer, thinking it was possibly because he was a nice man.
Very good. But that would be locals now, not locals a century ago, wouldn't it?
Yes, I think your friend was referring to locals now, or then rather, the people he met back in 1986.
I'm sure they thought Tom was a nice man too.
You're repeating yourself. Please get on with it.
Do you think that negative observations are helpful? OK, don't answer that. To my tale, or Tom's tale, rather. Tom had thoughts of staying at a hotel called Aggie Gray's, choosing that famous one first, there being only one other hotel in Apia, the capital of Samoa.
Why Aggie Gray's?
Why is it called that, or why did Tom choose it?
What do you think?
Well, Aggie was a pioneer of the hotel industry in Samoa and opened her own eponymous hotel in 1933. That word means she gave her name to it.
Probably Greek, I'd say. One eponym that I'm close to is aspirin.
Maybe the chemical name. I knew you'd have something to say about that. Keeping to the topic, the hotel is still there today, but now owned by the Chinese. Aggie was also possibly a model for James Michener's character Bloody Mary in his Tales of the South Pacific, published in 1946. Many big knob actors, including Marlon Brando, stayed at Aggie Gray's. My friend said that he had possibly sat on the same toilet as Gary Cooper.
Gary who?
How about Raymond Burr?
Sorry.
William Holden?
Oh, hold on.
No, Holden. D-E-N.
No, sorry.
Marlon Brando?
Yes, The Godfather.
Well, thank God for that. My friend joked that he also possibly sat on the same toilet seat as that great actor.
I thought it was Gary Holden.
In the spirit of kindness, if not tolerance, I'll assume you did an unintentional mix-up there. Can't believe you don't know Gary Cooper and William Holden. I must tell you, though, that my friend specialises a bit on famous loos, sits on them too. He stayed at the Peninsula Hotel in Hong Kong once, turned out to be the same room as Ronald Reagan had occupied, and of course, Tom said it was strange to think that the ex-president, or it might have been way back then the actual president, strange to think he was sitting on the same loo as Reagan had sat upon. Actually, I think that they might have removed the seat and framed it for posterity.
Posteriority?
Oh, you're on the ball today, Doc. I like that. Well done.
I don't think it would have been for public display in the lobby or anything. Not at a hotel like the Peninsula, a very swanky place, I imagine. Any other famous bums on seats?
I suppose one could make them up. An interesting idea, eh?
There could be an article or a book. Famous seats I have sat on. Please wipe before sitting. The Queen sat here.
Thank you for that, Doc. I'm going to keep going. Hold the line, as you call it, if that's all right with you. Back there a bit, I referred to James Michener.
I know Michener, famous for novels and foreign settings. Great thick novels they were. Did he stay at Aggie Gray's?
Yes, because he must have met Aggie herself. The point is that my friend Tom also met her. When he was having a look around the hotel, the owner herself was wheeled into the huge foyer where scores of people were milling around. She was swaddled in furs and blankets because of the aircon.
The air conditioning.
Same thing, well done. This was a ritual welcome she performed when a large group was checking in off a couple of buses. So small and frail was Aggie in the wheelchair, Tom thought that she was actually dead, all swathed and rugged up. The wheeler, actually the manager, shouted out, "Ladies and gentlemen, I give you the owner, Aggie Gray."
So he didn't say the eponymous hotel owner.
Tom said it was really embarrassing because people paid no attention. The travellers all tired, many having arrived on the one plane that day and intent on checking in and getting their keys to rooms from the two young local lassies on the reception desk. They were quite unaware that the once famous owner, now a corpse-like figure, had been rolled into their midst, a regular event usually resulting in acclaim and applause. Not on this occasion, though.
I wonder if Tom entertained the thought that it might have been because of his presence.
My friend is a well-adjusted person. He wouldn't have thought like that for a moment.
Very good, just a thought. In my business, you've got to entertain thoughts.
Your thoughts are indeed entertaining.
It's quite a tale. What happened next?
The manager wheeler chappie, miffed at being ignored, again bellowed, "Ladies and gentlemen, your attention, please." When only some of the rabble turned, he positively roared, "Here is Aggie Gray, the owner of this hotel. Please do her the honour of some silence and your attention." The uproar died down. They stopped babbling and looked towards the manager, some peering at the spectre in the chair. There was a pause. for about 3 seconds. Then everyone turned away to continue their chatter as if there was nothing else worth occupying them.
Oh, poor Aggie Gray. I really feel for her.
But then a strange thing happened. Somehow she had managed to catch Tom's eye and lifted her stick to signal him over to her. Tom was intrigued, so he approached, realizing that she wanted to say something, as she lifted her hand and beckoned him to come closer. Tom was amazed that she was going to speak. Aggie croaked something into his ear. He nodded vigorously and said, "Thank you, ma'am. We certainly will. We promise." Aggie was wheeled away, looking pleased, as if she had achieved some great thing.
Well, I understand suspense and holding your reader or listener, but there's really no need to do that speaking to me. Out with it, man.
You mean what Aggie said to Tom?
Why are you being so exasperating?
It's a good story. My friend always tells good stories.
I could be more of a judge of that if you would tell me what Aggie said to him.
My word. That's a fine stethoscope you've got there.
Stop it! I have the power to ask you to be taken away.
She told him that she hadn't been to Stevenson's grave in a long time, loved the writer, and she wouldn't be able to pay her respects again, not in her condition now. So would Tom do her the honour of paying a visit, a kind of pilgrimage on her behalf? Tom was planning to go anyway, so he was more than able to accede solemnly to her request, apart from which he was a gentleman, a gentle man, a kind man, who would have done anything she asked.
Very good. So he went as promised?
Oh yes, he told me it was an unexpected hike of 30 minutes up the hill behind Stevenson's house, which is now a museum. As he climbed, he managed to think kindly of Aggie. Told me later it was quite a moving experience, seeing the writer's grave amid palm trees and hibiscus, everything so tropical and lush, the sounds of honey-eaters, pigeons and bulbuls all around. Such a far cry from his native Edinburgh on the dreich east coast of Scotland.
I've been to Edinburgh. It was lovely in June.
Can be. There were sweeping views across Samoa and out over the South Pacific Ocean. Tom could feel that Stevenson must have been settled there, even so far from home, for the last 4 years of his short life among the Samoans, who so accepted and revered him, conferring on him the native name Tusitala, teller of tales, a sign of affection and thanks for the help and advice he gave them to improve their lives.
I hope Tom went back to Aggie's hotel to report on his visit.
No. He didn't like her hotel. A bit run down, he said. So he went to the only other hotel in town, a bright new place, built in traditional Polynesian style, all thatched and open. This is known as a fale in Samoan. This other hotel was clean and well organised, and there were no corpses being wheeled around. Its name was Tusitala. Aggie Gray died a couple of years later.
She must have been a good age if she remembered Stevenson.
I'm sorry? Did I say that? I think not. She was born 3 years after he died. Aggie was born in 1897.
I was so captivated by Tom's tale, I simply added to the verisimilitude by imagining she had met the great writer.
I think you should stick to words like aspirin.
Ah, yes, an eponymous word.
I'm glad that you were held by the retelling of Tom's tale as much as I was by Tom's original relating.
Yes, it's a great tale for Tom to tell his children. I hope he has told them.
Indeed he has, and I'm sure they were as enthralled as me.
And me.
I have an addendum, a tale to Tom's tale.
Can't be as good, but do go on.
I was out and about recently one day here in Kerikeri, New Zealand. It's way north of Auckland, got a subtropical climate, grows heaps of kiwi fruits and vines, and I chanced to go into the hospice store looking for cheap pet food for our 3 rescue cats. The storeman there was an elderly gent with a strong accent, so I asked him where he was from originally. I was surprised to hear it was Western Samoa, and he had come to Kiwiland on holiday when he was 18 and never looked back. Of course, he knew of Stevenson, told me he was called Tusitala, and the way he said it, I surmised wrongly that it was Pidgin English. But Wikipedia told me it's Samoan, a language Stevenson learned and wrote in. The storeman said that Stevenson's old house and the land behind it, including the graveyard, was now government owned. I said it's now a museum. Then he said, Aggie Gray used to come to Kerikeri to visit an aunt a long time ago. She came several times. I could feel my mouth fall open.
Small world, eh?
A final word on the teller of tales. Do you know what he was doing when he died?
Writing a story?
No, nothing so prosaic, so to speak. He collapsed and died as he was straining to open a bottle of wine.
Not a bad way to go.
That's one of the best things you've said today, Doc. I'm in total agreement. Now, did I tell you that Tom went on to become a psychiatrist? It's something you aspire to, becoming a trick cyclist, isn't it?
I would say that listening to you would qualify me for some kind of honorary conferment. No need for further studies.
You'll get your reward in heaven, Doc, I'm sure.
Oh, look at the time. You must have been interesting. I've got a couple more clients to see. Would you like to make another appointment, perhaps, to see if we can delve deeper and extract a few more meaningful memories? Remember, the true success is to labour.
Yes, travelling, hopefully. OK, all right. You're a pretty good listener. What was the discount rate again? Under the wide and starry sky, dig the grave and let me lie. Glad did I live and gladly die, and I laid me down with a will. This be the verse you grave for me. Here he lies where he longed to be. Home is the sailor, home from the sea, and the hunter, home from the hill.